In HTML, there are two kinds of elements that you need to be aware of, and that's what this lesson is about. The two types I'm talking about are block elements and inline elements, and each one behaves a different way, and you kind of need to know, in order to get the layout of your page working correctly, you kind of need to know which is which. Okay, so a block element is something that takes up the whole width of its container. So for example, I've created a heading here, and I set up the CSS so that the background of this heading would be pink. And you'll notice that no matter how wide I make the screen, the pink goes all the way across the screen because a heading is a block element. Okay. The next thing I coded in the page, right after the heading, here's the heading, is a paragraph. Okay. And since a paragraph is also a block element, the paragraph goes underneath the heading automatically. Okay, so in block elements, they take up the full width of their container, and if you code them one after another, they're going to end up on top of each other. Okay, so you can see with the paragraph as well, the orange from the background goes all the way across the screen, and that's because paragraphs are block elements. Okay, a really common type of inline element is called a span. So you can see here I created a span element, and the span is an inline element. It doesn't take up the full width of the screen, okay? And if you code them one after another, they will not end up on top of each other, okay? These two are on top of each other. I coded two spans here only because I put a line break in between them in the code. Okay, if I get rid of this line break, you can see, boom, if I code two spans one after each other on the page, they show up one after each other. You can also see that the yellow of the background on these spans only goes as wide as the span element itself. As the content, it doesn't use up the full width of the screen there. Okay. Perhaps a more common example than a span is a link. Like if you just start coding a link and you put those anchor tags out on their own in the body, right? I haven't put these anchor tags inside of a paragraph. A link, an anchor element, is an inline element. Okay, now I haven't put any CSS on this, so it doesn't have a background yet, but I could just to show you, and it would do the same thing. Background color, let's do purple. There, so you can see that this link is the same as that span. It's an inline element, and if you code inline elements one after each other, they show up in line with each other, not on top of each other. Okay. Another really important example of an inline element is an image. Okay, by default, images are inline, and that perhaps isn't something that you would expect on a website. Here I've put an image in the middle of a paragraph, right there, and you can see on the page that the image is treated just like another piece of text. It's put in the middle of the paragraph in line with the rest of the text. Okay, so that's something to be careful about. Now, why do we care about this? Well, you can use this fact of block and inline elements to do some interesting formatting stuff. And one of the most common ways that people do that is they use a container element, which is called a div. So you see what I've done here is I've made an image with two paragraphs. And what I did is I wanted all of that to go inside of one container and be treated like one unit of page content. That container that I used is called a div. Div is short for division. Okay, and what a division allows you to do is apply some CSS. See, I wrote this CSS right here for the div, and you can put that CSS now on all of these elements inside of the container just by writing one chunk of CSS for the div. And you can see that what it does on the page is it creates kind of a visual container, right? Now this is kind of ugly, but I could go ahead and change this so that it's styled decently. Let's do background color gray. course, it's between classes. You can hear that I just heard the bell there. And let's get rid of this background color. And now I've got a more decent looking div.
Will the following students please come to the attendance office? Xavier Yanez, Gracie Waterbury, Carl Kane. Again, will the following students please come to the
And that's kind of a
attendance
nice way that you can use containers in order to do nice stylistic things within your pages. Okay, so the div is a really important block level element. Last thing I want to show you in this particular lesson is sometimes you want your images to behave like block level elements. You want them to take up the whole width of the page. So I'm going to go ahead and give my image a background color of red so you can see this happening. And I'm going to change the images, all of them, so that instead of being inline images, I'm going to make them into block elements. And you do that by display block. Now you can see right away that the images have all put themselves on their own line on the page. Now this one down here was already on its own line, but this one used to be in the middle of the paragraph. Now it's not, because I just changed it so that images are block elements. Okay. By the way, if you want one centered, this is how you do that in CSS. You say display block, margin auto. Margin is the space outside of an element, and auto means calculate it automatically so that it's equal on both sides. You can see as soon as I did that, the images got centered. So we're starting to get a taste of some tools we can use to lay out our pages. The assignment that goes along with this video is in W3 Schools. You start with the HTML blocks lesson. Read through that and do the try-its. There's also the HTML classes lesson, which you should already have a handle on. Classes work really well with divs so that you can apply a bunch of styling to one chunk of code at the same time. And then last but not least is iframes. I'm not going to show this in this video, but an iframe is a way that you can have a little window within inside a web page that shows a different web page inside of it. That's kind of a handy trick. Happy coding.